Perfect. That's exactly what I told my daughter-in-law Taylor when she announced that 22 people from her family would be coming to spend Christmas at my house in Baltimore. I'm going on vacation. You all can cook and clean. I'm not an employee. Her face went pale as if she'd seen a ghost. But what she didn't know was that the real surprise was just beginning. My name is Rosalind Jenkins. I'm 64 years old, and for the past 6 years, I've been treated like a maid in my own home. It all started when my son Marcus married that woman. From day one, Taylor decided I was her personal assistant. Rosalind, get me coffee. Rosalind, clean this. Rosalind, cook for my guests. And I, like a fool, always obeyed. I thought that was how I'd keep my family together, how I'd maintain peace, how I'd be the mother Marcus needed me to be. But I had reached my limit. That cold Tuesday morning in December, Taylor walked into my kitchen as she always did, without knocking, without asking permission, as if my historic row house in Bolton Hill belonged to her instead of me. She wore that fake smile I'd grown to detest, dressed in an expensive burgundy coat that Marcus had surely paid for with money they didn't actually have. Her designer heels clicked against my hardwood floors like hammers against my patience, each step a reminder of her entitled assumption that this was her domain. Rosalind, she said with that condescending tone she'd perfected over 6 years of marriage to my son, I have wonderful news. My whole family is coming to spend Christmas here in Baltimore. It's only 22 people. Only 22 people. As if it were nothing. As if I were a cooking and cleaning machine with no life, no feelings, no limits to what I could endure. As if my 64 years on this earth had prepared me for nothing except serving her and her endless demands. I watched as her eyes gleamed with something I'd finally learned to recognize as malice. She wasn't sharing news. She was issuing orders, and she expected me to respond the way I always had, with quiet acceptance and immediate compliance. She settled into one of my kitchen chairs, the antique ones I'd refinished myself after my husband died, crossed her legs with theatrical precision, and began listing names as if reading from a shopping list she'd prepared specifically to overwhelm me. I've already spoken with my sister Simone, my cousin Gabrielle, my brother-in-law Brandon, my uncle Vincent. They're all coming from Virginia and Pennsylvania. My nieces and nephews, my second cousins, Simone's kids will be here too. It will be a perfect Christmas. She paused dramatically, watching my face for the panic she'd trained me to display, waiting for that moment when I would start mentally calculating how many turkeys I'd need to buy, how many hours I'd need to spend cooking, how much of my retirement savings I'd need to drain to feed her family while she took all the credit. Of course, you'll take care of everything, she continued, her voice dripping with the assumption that had defined our relationship for 6 years. The food, the cleaning, serving the tables, making sure everyone is comfortable. You know how it works. Her words hit me like slaps across the face. I remembered all the times I'd prepared elaborate dinners for her friends while she posed for Instagram photos, pretending she'd cooked everything herself. All the times I'd cleaned up after her parties, scrubbing dishes until 0 inches the morning while she slept peacefully in the guest room she'd claimed as her own personal space in my house. All the times I had been invisible in my own home, a ghost in the background of her carefully curated life. All the times Marcus had looked the other way, choosing his wife's comfort over his mother's dignity. We'll need at least 3 turkeys, Taylor continued, pulling out her phone to show me Pinterest boards she'd created. And that chocolate pecan pie you make, the one everyone raves about. Oh, and you'll have to decorate the entire house. I want it to look magazine perfect. I'm planning to do a whole Christmas series on my social media, and the aesthetic has to be flawless. She scrolled through images of elaborate table settings and color-coordinated decorations, completely oblivious to the fact that each picture represented hours of my labor, days of my time, hundreds of dollars of my money. She waited for my typical response, that automatic, yes, Taylor, that I'd trained myself to say to avoid conflict, to keep peace, to be the accommodating mother-in-law who never caused problems. But this time was different. This time, something inside me had finally broken, or perhaps more accurately, something inside me had finally healed enough to recognize that what I'd been calling family unity was actually systematic abuse, dressed up in holiday traditions. I looked her directly in the eyes with a calm that surprised even me, a serenity that came from months of planning, months of preparing, months of finally deciding that my dignity mattered more than her convenience. "Perfect," I repeated slowly, watching as her confident smile began to falter at the edges. "It will be a perfect Christmas for you and your family, Taylor, because I won't be here." The silence that followed felt like the air pressure dropping before a storm. Taylor blinked several times, her perfectly applied makeup unable to hide the confusion flooding her features. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. The clicking of her heels stopped abruptly. The phone in her hand lowered slowly. "Forgotten." "What do you mean you won't be here?" She finally managed to articulate, her voice taking on a sharp edge that revealed the anger beneath her polished exterior. "Is this some kind of joke? Did Marcus put you up to this?" She sat up straighter in my chair, her perfect posture beginning to crack under the weight of genuine surprise. She'd never considered the possibility that I might say no, that I might have my own plans, that I might exist as something more than an extension of her will. "Exactly what you heard, Taylor. I'm going on vacation. A real vacation. The kind I haven't taken in 6 years because I've been too busy being your unpaid caterer and housekeeper. You all can cook, clean, and serve yourselves. I am not your employee." I watched as the color completely drained from her carefully bronzed face. Her hands began to tremble slightly, causing the expensive rings Marcus had bought her to catch the morning light. The confidence that usually surrounded her like armor started to crack, revealing something underneath that looked almost like fear. "But Rosalind," she stammered, and I noticed she'd dropped the condescending tone for the first time in years. "I already told everyone to come. Everything is planned. My Uncle Vincent is driving up from Richmond. Simone is flying in from Pittsburgh. I promised them a traditional Jenkins family Christmas." "A Jenkins family Christmas," I repeated, tasting the irony of those words. "Interesting that you'd use my family name to describe an event where I'm expected to work like a servant while you play hostess in my house." "Of course I can do this. It's my house, Taylor. My name is on the deed. My mortgage payments built this equity. My retirement savings maintain it. You've been treating it like your personal event venue for 6 years, but that ends today." Those words landed like grenades in my kitchen. Taylor stood abruptly, her heels clattering with a new urgency that sounded less like confidence and more like panic. "This is ridiculous," she said, her voice rising to a pitch I'd never heard before. "Marcus won't allow this. When he gets home from work, we're going to have a serious conversation about your attitude." "Marcus can have whatever opinion he wants," I replied calmly, "but the decision is already made. For the first time in 6 years, I'm in control of my own home, my own time, my own life." But what Taylor didn't know, what none of them knew, was that my decision hadn't been spontaneous. I had been planning this moment for months, gathering evidence, consulting professionals, preparing for exactly this confrontation. And I had my reasons that would soon leave them all speechless. Taylor's expression morphed from shock to fury in the span of seconds. Her carefully maintained composure shattered completely. Her cheeks flushed a deep red that clashed with her expensive makeup. Her eyes narrowed into slits. She stepped closer to me, invading my personal space the way she always did when she wanted to intimidate me into submission. "You know what, Rosalind? I always knew you were bitter about Marcus marrying me, but this is beyond petty. This is cruel." Her voice turned venomous, each word carefully chosen to wound. "My family is coming from different states. Some of them are taking vacation days. And you're going to ruin their Christmas over what? Some pathetic power trip? A power trip. 6 years of cooking, cleaning, serving, and being treated like invisible help in my own home. and she called my one act of self-respect a power trip. I felt rage rise in my chest, hot and righteous, but I kept my face serene. I had learned to control my emotions after so many years of swallowing them down to keep peace in a house that had stopped feeling like my sanctuary. "It's not my problem that you made promises using my labor without asking my permission," I said, my voice steady and cold. "You should have consulted me before inviting 22 people to my house, before assuming I would spend thousands of dollars on groceries, before deciding how I would spend my Christmas." "Our house," Taylor screamed, completely losing the polished facade she usually maintained. "Marcus is your son. This house will eventually be his, which means it will be ours. I'm just planning ahead." There it was. The truth that had been lurking beneath every entitled demand, every condescending order, every assumption that my home was hers to command. Taylor didn't see me as her mother-in-law. She saw me as a temporary obstacle, standing between her and an inheritance she'd already spent in her mind. She saw my death as a financial opportunity, my home as her future asset, my belongings as items she was already cataloging for resale. "Interesting perspective," I murmured, watching her face as she realized what she'd just revealed. "Very interesting that you're already planning for my death and your inheritance. Tell me, Taylor, does Marcus know you think about our family dynamic in such transactional terms?" Her face went white. She'd said too much, revealed the ugly truth that usually stayed hidden beneath her fake smiles and hollow compliments. She opened her mouth to backtrack, to explain, to manipulate her way out of the corner she'd backed herself into, but at that exact moment, I heard keys turning in my front door. Marcus had arrived home early from his job at the financial firm downtown. Taylor practically ran to him, her heels hitting my hardwood floors with desperate urgency. "Marcus, Marcus, your mother has lost her mind. She says she's not going to help with Christmas. She says she's going on vacation and abandoning us with my entire family coming." I heard their muffled voices from the living room. Taylor was speaking rapidly, her tone shrill and dramatic, painting me as unreasonable, as crazy, as the villain in a story where she was always the victim. Marcus mumbled responses I couldn't quite make out, his voice deeper but no less concerned. After several long minutes, their footsteps approached the kitchen. My son appeared in the doorway, still wearing his expensive suit from work, his tie loosened, his face showing exhaustion from a long day, managing other people's money while apparently being blind to how his own wife managed his mother. Behind him, Taylor followed like a shadow, arms crossed over her chest, a triumphant expression on her face. She clearly expected Marcus to put me in my place, to remind me of my role, to restore the order she'd established in my home. "Mom," Marcus began, and I heard it immediately, that paternalistic tone he'd adopted somewhere during his marriage, the tone that suggested he was the parent now and I was the child who needed correction. "Taylor told me about your decision. Don't you think you're being a little dramatic?" Dramatic. My own son, the boy I'd raised alone after his father died, the child I'd put through college while working 2 jobs, the man I'd supported through every setback and celebrated through every success, that son was now calling me dramatic for refusing to be his wife's servant. I felt something cold and hard settle in my chest, something that had been forming for months but finally crystallized in that moment. This wasn't just about Christmas dinner. This was about respect, about boundaries, about whether I would spend the remaining years of my life being used by people who claimed to love me but treated me like unpaid staff. "No, Marcus," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "I'm not being dramatic. I'm being clear, perhaps for the first time in 6 years. Clear about my boundaries, clear about my expectations, clear about the fact that I will no longer accept being treated like an employee in my own home." "But Mom, it's Christmas," Marcus said, and I heard the whine in his voice, the same tone he'd used as a teenager when he wanted something and thought guilt would work better than honesty. "It's family time. Taylor already invited everyone. We can't cancel now. What will people think?" I didn't say cancel. I replied calmly. I said I won't be here. You're both adults. You're both capable. Figure it out. Taylor stepped forward, positioning herself between Marcus and me like a physical barrier, like she could somehow block the truth from reaching him if she just stood in the right place. See what I mean, Marcus? She's being completely irrational. What will my family think when they arrive and there's no food, no decorations, no hostess? What will I tell my Uncle Vincent? He's driving 4 hours from Richmond, specifically for this. Tell them the truth, I replied, meeting Taylor's furious gaze without flinching. Tell them you assumed I would be your caterer and maid without bothering to ask if I was available or willing. Tell them you were wrong. Marcus sighed deeply, running his hand through his hair the way he always did when frustrated, a gesture he'd inherited from his father. Mom, please be reasonable. You know Taylor can't cook for 22 people by herself. It's too much work. And why is that my problem? I asked, genuinely curious to hear his answer. Why is it automatically my responsibility to cook for your wife's family? Why am I expected to spend my time, my energy, and my money on people who treat me like I'm invisible? Because you're good at it, Taylor interjected, her voice taking on a desperate edge. Because you love cooking. Because family takes care of family. Family takes care of family. The irony of those words coming from her mouth was almost laughable. You're right, Taylor. Family does take care of family. So tell me, when was the last time you took care of me? When was the last time you cooked a meal I didn't have to prepare? When was the last time you cleaned up after one of your parties? When was the last time you considered my needs before making plans in my house? The silence that followed was deafening. Taylor's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Marcus looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from foot to foot, clearly wanting to be anywhere but in this kitchen having this conversation. That's different, Taylor finally said weakly. I work. My career is important. I don't have time for all that domestic stuff. Your career, I repeated slowly. You mean your part-time position at that boutique in Harbor East? The one where you work 15 hours a week selling overpriced handbags to women who have more money than sense? Taylor's face flushed again. It's a networking opportunity. I'm building connections. You wouldn't understand the importance of professional relationships. You're right, I wouldn't understand, I said, because I spent 30 years teaching middle school students in Baltimore City, working 50-hour weeks, staying late for parent conferences, spending my own money on classroom supplies, actually building a career that meant something. So forgive me if I don't find your part-time retail position impressive enough to excuse 6 years of treating me like your personal servant. Marcus finally found his voice, though it sounded strained. Mom, this isn't helping. Can we just talk about Christmas? Maybe we can hire a caterer if the cooking is too much. I'll pay for it. Hire a caterer, I said, letting the suggestion hang in the air. Do you have any idea how much that would cost for 22 people, Marcus? I don't know. Maybe a few $1,000s, he said, clearly having no concept of the actual cost. Try $5,000, minimum, for the quality Taylor would demand, I informed him, and that doesn't include decorations, serving staff, or cleanup. Are you prepared to spend that much? I watched as reality dawned on his face. Marcus was good with other people's finances, but apparently he had no grip on his own. The uncomfortable expression that crossed his features told me everything I needed to know. He didn't have $5,000 to spare, not with the lifestyle they'd been living, not with Taylor's shopping habits, not with the illusion of wealth they'd been maintaining. We could figure something out, he said weakly. Maybe something simpler, less expensive. Or, I said calmly, you could tell your wife's family that Christmas is canceled due to poor planning. Or you could let Taylor actually handle her own family gathering for once. Or, and here's a radical idea, you could respect my decision to spend Christmas the way I choose to spend it, which is anywhere but here being your unpaid domestic staff. Taylor's eyes filled with tears, but I'd seen her cry before, watched her use emotion as a weapon to manipulate Marcus into giving her what she wanted. "Rosalind, please," she said, her voice breaking. "I'm sorry if I made you feel unappreciated. I didn't realize you felt this way. Can't we just start over? I promise things will be different." "Different how?" I asked. "You'll say please and thank you while still expecting me to do all the work? You'll compliment my cooking while taking credit for it on social media? You'll pretend to value me while already planning how to sell my house after I die?" The last comment made Marcus's head snap up. "What are you talking about? Who said anything about selling your house?" "Your wife did," I said, watching Taylor's face go pale. "Just a few minutes ago, she made it very clear that she sees this house as her future asset, that she's just waiting for me to die so she can inherit it." "That's not what I meant," Taylor protested, but her voice lacked conviction. "You're twisting my words. I was just saying that Marcus is your son, so naturally, you've been treating me like a temporary inconvenience," I finished for her. "Naturally, you've been using my home like your personal party venue. Naturally, you've been spending my son's money, running up credit card debt, and making financial decisions based on an inheritance you assume is coming." Marcus looked between us, confusion, and something that might have been dawning awareness crossing his face. "Taylor, what is she talking about? What credit card debt?" Taylor shot me a look of pure hatred. "Nothing, Marcus. Your mother is making things up because she's angry. She's trying to cause problems between us." "Am I?" I walked to my kitchen counter and picked up a folder I'd placed there earlier that morning, knowing this conversation was coming. Because I have documentation that says otherwise. Documentation that's been very interesting to review. Marcus took a step toward me. "Mom, what's in that folder?" "The truth," I said simply. "The truth about where your money has been going. The truth about credit cards opened in your name that you don't know about. The truth about loans taken out using my house as collateral without my permission. The truth about who your wife really is when she thinks no one is paying attention." Taylor's face had gone from pale to gray. She looked like she might actually faint. "You've been spying on me? You hired someone to investigate me?" "I hired someone to protect my interests," I corrected. "After I noticed some irregularities in financial statements that accidentally got delivered to my house instead of yours. After I overheard phone conversations about credit limits and payment schedules. After I started paying attention to the lies you tell so casually that I don't think you even recognize them as lies anymore." Marcus reached for the folder, his hand trembling slightly. "Let me see that." I handed it to him, watching as my son opened it and began reading the documents I'd spent months gathering. Credit card statements showing purchases he'd never authorized. Loan applications with forged signatures. Email correspondence between Taylor and various lenders discussing my property as potential collateral. The paper trail of financial deception was extensive and damning. His face went through a series of changes as he read. Confusion, disbelief, anger, and finally a sick kind of recognition that suggested some part of him had known something was wrong but had chosen not to look too closely. "Taylor," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "what is all this? This credit card from First National Bank, I never applied for this. And this loan from Harbor Financial, it has my signature but I never signed anything." "I can explain," Taylor said quickly, but there was panic in her voice now, the desperation of someone watching their carefully constructed lies crumble. "We needed the money, Marcus. Your salary is good, but it's not enough for the lifestyle we should be living. I was just trying to help us get ahead, to give us the life we deserve. By committing fraud?" Marcus's voice rose. "By forging my signature? By using my mother's property without permission?" "It's not fraud when we're married," Taylor shot back. "What's yours is mine. That's how marriage works. And your mother's house will be ours eventually anyway, so I was just being proactive." "Proactive," I repeated, letting the word hang in the air. "That's an interesting way to describe identity theft and attempted mortgage fraud." Taylor whirled on me, all pretense of sweetness gone. You don't understand anything. You lived in a different time, when a teacher's salary was enough, when people stayed in the same house their whole lives. This is the real world, Rosalind. This is what it takes to succeed in Baltimore, to maintain appearances, to be someone who matters. And who exactly do you matter to? I asked quietly. Your Instagram followers? The women at your boutique who pretend to be your friends while laughing at you behind your back? The credit card companies who are happy to enable your addiction to spending money you don't have? That's enough, Marcus said. But I wasn't sure if he was talking to me or to Taylor. He was still staring at the documents, flipping through page after page of evidence. Mom, how long have you known about this? About 4 months, I admitted. I started noticing things didn't add up. Financial statements arriving here that should have gone to your address. Phone calls from collection agencies. Taylor's increasingly expensive wardrobe despite her part-time job. So I hired a private investigator, a woman named Monica Price, who used to work financial crimes for the Baltimore Police Department. Taylor's eyes went wide. You hired a detective? To spy on your own family? To protect myself, I corrected. And it's a good thing I did, because what Monica discovered goes far beyond credit card debt. Tell them about the second mortgage you tried to take out on this house, Taylor. The one you attempted to process using forged documents with my signature. The color drained from Taylor's face completely. Marcus's head snapped up from the documents. A second mortgage? On Mom's house? Taylor, please tell me that's not true. I was trying to help us, Taylor said, but her voice had lost all its strength. We're drowning in debt, Marcus. Your mother lives in this huge house all by herself while we're crammed in that tiny condo. It's not fair. She's 64 years old. She doesn't need all this space. I was just trying to access some of the equity for our future. For your future? I said coldly. You weren't planning to pay any of that money back to me. You were planning to wait until I died and inherit a house with a mortgage I never agreed to, leaving my son with debt he didn't ask for. Marcus sank into one of my kitchen chairs, the folder falling from his hands onto the table. He looked like a man who'd just discovered his entire life was built on lies. I don't understand. When did this start? How did we get here? It started 6 years ago, I said gently, because despite everything, he was still my son. The first Christmas after you got married, when Taylor decided I should cook for 30 of her friends and family, when I said yes because I wanted to make you happy, when I set a precedent that I was available to be used. That's not fair, Taylor protested weakly. You offered to cook that year. You said you wanted to help. I offered because you manipulated me into feeling like I had no choice, I replied. Because you cried and said your family couldn't afford to travel to see them, so bringing them here was the only option. Because you made me feel like saying no would make me a terrible mother-in-law. And then the next year, you didn't ask. You just told me they were coming. And the year after that, and the year after that, until it became expected, assumed, demanded. Marcus looked up at his wife, and for the first time, I saw him seeing her clearly. Is that true? Did you manipulate my mother? I didn't manipulate anyone, Taylor said, but there was no conviction in her voice anymore. I assumed she enjoyed it. She's good at cooking and hosting. I thought she liked feeling needed. Needed, I said bitterly. Is that what you call it when you text me at midnight demanding I make your favorite dessert by morning? When you show up unannounced with 10 people expecting dinner? When you go through my closets looking for things you want to borrow without asking? When you take credit for meals I prepared and post them on social media, as if you cooked them yourself? You do that? Marcus asked, looking at Taylor with growing horror. You take credit for Mom's cooking? Everyone does that, Taylor said defensively. It's social media, Marcus. Nobody posts pictures of food someone else made. That would be weird. What's weird? I said, my voice hard as steel, is pretending to be someone you're not. What's weird is building an entire online persona around being a perfect wife and homemaker when you can't even boil water without burning the pot. What's weird is using your mother-in-law as unpaid labor while taking credit for her work. Marcus stood up slowly, and I could see him processing everything, recalculating 6 years of marriage through this new lens. Taylor, I need you to be completely honest with me right now. How much debt are we actually in? Taylor's silence was answer enough. Marcus's face hardened. How much? Including the credit cards you don't know about, the personal loans, and the payment plan for my car, probably around $75,000, she whispered. The number hung in the air like a grenade. Marcus staggered backward, catching himself on the counter. $75,000? How is that even possible? I make good money. Where did it all go? Clothes, trips, dinners at expensive restaurants, the lifestyle we've been maintaining, Taylor said, and now she was crying for real. Not the manipulative tears I'd seen before, but genuine fear and shame. I thought you made more than you do. I thought we could afford it. You thought wrong, Marcus said, his voice hollow. We can't afford any of this. We've been living like we make 3 times what I actually earn. How could you do this without telling me? How could you hide $75,000 in debt? Because you never wanted to talk about money, Taylor shot back, finding some of her fight again. Every time I tried to discuss our finances, you'd say you had it handled, that I shouldn't worry, so I stopped worrying and started spending. That's not how marriage works, Marcus said. That's not how any of this works. He turned to me, his eyes pleading. Mom, I had no idea. I swear I didn't know about any of this. The forged signatures, the attempted mortgage fraud, I would never have agreed to any of it. I believe you, I said, because despite everything, I knew my son. Marcus had his faults, but deliberate deception wasn't one of them. He'd been blind, willfully ignorant perhaps, but not actively malicious. But that doesn't change the situation. Your wife has been committing crimes using your identity and my property. The question now is what we're going to do about it. We can fix this, Taylor said desperately, looking between Marcus and me. We can pay everything back. I'll get a full-time job. We'll sell things. We can make this right. How? I asked simply. With what money? Your $75,000 in debt. Your part-time job pays maybe $20,000 a year. Marcus's salary, after taxes and basic living expenses, leaves maybe $30,000 annually. Even if you both worked constantly and spent nothing on anything except debt repayment, it would take you years to dig out of this hole. The math was brutal and undeniable. Marcus sank back into the chair, his head in his hands. This is a nightmare. How did I not see this happening? Because she didn't want you to see it, I said gently. Taylor is very good at manipulation, at making people see what she wants them to see. She's been doing it to both of us for 6 years, just in different ways. I'm standing right here, Taylor said angrily. Stop talking about me like I'm not in the room, and stop acting like you're perfect, Rosalind. You're not innocent in all this either. You enabled this situation by always saying yes, by always being available, by never setting boundaries until now. You're right, I admitted, and the surprise on Taylor's face was almost comical. I did enable this. I was so afraid of losing my relationship with Marcus, so afraid of being the difficult mother-in-law, that I allowed you to use me. That's my fault. But what's your fault is exploiting that fear, weaponizing my love for my son, and committing actual crimes. Marcus looked up, his face haggard. What happens now? Are you going to press charges? Turn Taylor in? That depends, I said carefully. On whether she's willing to face real consequences and make real changes, or whether this is just another manipulation to avoid accountability. What kind of consequences? Taylor asked warily. Legal ones, I said. Financial ones, personal ones, the kind that actually hurt and actually teach lessons. I walked to my kitchen counter and pulled out another folder, this one prepared by my attorney Leonard Carter. I've had my lawyer draft several documents. The first is a formal report of the attempted mortgage fraud to be filed with the Maryland Attorney General's office. The second is a cease and desist order preventing you from using my property or my name for any financial purposes. The third is a repayment agreement for any money you've spent that came from accounts with my name on them. Taylor's face went white. You can't do that. That would ruin everything. I could go to jail. Yes, I said simply, you could. Mortgage fraud is a federal crime. Identity theft is a serious offense. The question is whether you'd prefer to deal with me or deal with federal prosecutors. Mom, Marcus said, his voice breaking. She's my wife. Despite everything, I still love her. Please don't destroy her life. I'm not destroying anything, I replied. Taylor destroyed her own life through her choices. I'm just deciding whether to document those choices for law enforcement or handle this privately. And that decision depends on what happens next. What do you want? Taylor asked, and for the first time since I'd known her, she sounded genuinely defeated. I want honesty, I said. I want accountability. I want you to tell your family the truth about why Christmas is canceled. I want you to come clean to Marcus about every single debt, every single lie, every single manipulation. And I want you to sign these agreements my lawyer prepared. I handed her the third folder. This is a legally binding document stating that you will repay every penny you've stolen or fraudulently obtained. It includes a payment plan, an interest rate, and consequences for non-payment. It also includes a provision that if you fail to make payments, I can pursue criminal charges without any statute of limitations concerns. Taylor took the folder with shaking hands. And if I sign this, you won't go to the police? If you sign this, follow through on every term, get therapy for your spending addiction, get a full-time job, and stay out of my house unless explicitly invited, then yes, I'll keep this between us. But if you violate any term, if you miss even one payment, if you lie to Marcus again, if you try to manipulate him into pressuring me, then every document goes to the authorities. Are we clear? Crystal clear? Taylor whispered. Marcus stood up slowly, moving to stand beside his wife. Mom, thank you. Thank you for not destroying everything. I know we don't deserve your mercy. You don't, I agreed. But I'm giving it anyway, because you're my son, and because I believe people can change if they're forced to face real consequences. Taylor has been living in a fantasy world where actions don't have repercussions. That ends today. What about Christmas? Taylor asked quietly. What do I tell my family? Tell them the truth, I said. That you overextended yourself financially and emotionally. That you can't afford to host 22 people. That you made a mistake assuming your mother-in-law would do all the work. Tell them whatever you want, but leave me out of it. This is your problem to solve. Where are you going for the holidays? Marcus asked. Somewhere I've wanted to visit for years but never took the time, I said with a small smile. I'm flying to Charleston on December 23rd. I've rented a small cottage near the beach. I'm going to read books, take walks, eat at restaurants where someone else does the cooking, and remember what it feels like to live for myself. Marcus's eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry for everything. I know you are, I said softly, walking over to cup my son's face the way I used to when he was a child. And I forgive you, Marcus. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean going back to how things were. Things are going to be different from now on. Different how? He asked. Different as in boundaries. I explained. Different as in, you don't have keys to my house anymore. Different as in visits are scheduled in advance, not assumed. Different as in, I'm not your backup plan for childcare, cooking, or financial emergencies. Different as in you're a grown man with a wife and responsibilities, and I'm a woman who's earned the right to live her own life. Marcus nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. That's fair. That's more than fair. Taylor was still standing there, holding the folder, tears streaming down her face. I really am sorry, Rosalind. I know you don't believe me. But I am. I got caught up in trying to be someone I'm not, trying to impress people who don't matter, and I lost sight of what's actually important. Then prove it, I said. Sign those documents. Tell your family the truth. Get help for your spending problem. Become the person Marcus thought he was marrying instead of the person you've been pretending to be. She nodded, wiping her eyes. I will. I promise I will. Promises are just words, Taylor. I've heard a lot of promises from you over the years. What I need now is action, consistent action over time. That's the only thing that will rebuild trust. Marcus put his arm around Taylor's shoulders. We'll figure this out, Mom. Somehow, we'll make this right. I hope so, I said honestly. Because the alternative is criminal prosecution and divorce, and neither of those outcomes serves anyone well. After they left, taking the folders with them, I stood in my kitchen for a long moment, feeling the weight of 6 years lifting from my shoulders. The house felt different already, lighter somehow, like it was breathing again after being held underwater. I called my travel agent and confirmed my flight to Charleston. Then I called Leonard Carter, my attorney, and let him know that Taylor had taken the documents. Do you think she'll sign them? He asked. I think she will, I said, because the alternative is too frightening for her to contemplate. Taylor's greatest fear is public humiliation and loss of status. Prison would destroy the image she spent years building. And if she doesn't sign, if she violates the terms, then we proceed with criminal charges, I said calmly. I've given her a choice. What she does with that choice is up to her. You're a strong woman, Rosalind, Leonard said with admiration in his voice. Most people in your situation would have either stayed silent or gone nuclear immediately. You've found a middle path. I'm a mother, I replied. Even when my son disappoints me, even when his wife betrays me, I still want what's best for him. But I've learned that what's best isn't always what's easiest or most comfortable. Sometimes love means letting people face the consequences of their choices. Over the next few days, I prepared for my trip to Charleston. I packed light, choosing comfortable clothes and good books. I made arrangements with my neighbor to watch the house. I changed the locks, something I should have done years ago. On December 22nd, the day before my flight, my phone rang. It was Marcus. Mom, Taylor signed everything. She met with your lawyer this morning and signed all the documents. She also called her family and told them Christmas is canceled due to financial constraints. They weren't happy, but she was honest about it being her fault. Good, I said, feeling a mixture of relief and sadness. That's a start. She also made an appointment with a therapist who specializes in spending disorders, Marcus continued, and she applied for 3 full-time positions. She's trying, Mom. She's really trying. I'm glad to hear it, I said sincerely. Real change is hard, but it's possible if someone genuinely wants it. I want you to know something, Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. I'm proud of you. I know that sounds backwards, a son being proud of his mother, but I am. You stood up for yourself when it would have been easier to just go along. You set boundaries when it would have been more comfortable to keep the peace. You taught me something important about self-respect and dignity. Thank you, Marcus, I said, my own eyes filling with tears. That means more to me than you know. Have a wonderful Christmas in Charleston, he said. You've earned it. And Mom, I love you. Not for what you can do for me, but for who you are. I love you too, son, I whispered. I always have, and I always will. The morning of December 23rd arrived, crisp and clear. I woke up early, not from anxiety but from excitement, a feeling I hadn't experienced in years. I was actually looking forward to Christmas, looking forward to time spent on my own terms, in a place of my choosing, with no obligations except to myself. The taxi arrived at 9 to take me to Baltimore Washington International Airport. As we drove through the streets of Bolton Hill, past the historic row houses and familiar neighborhoods, I felt a strange mixture of emotions. This was my city, my home, but I was leaving it behind for a week to remember who Rosalind Jenkins was beyond mother, beyond grandmother-in-law, beyond the roles others had assigned me. The flight to Charleston was smooth and uneventful. I had a window seat and spent most of the journey reading a novel I'd been meaning to finish for months, back when I'd had time for such luxuries. The woman next to me, probably in her 50 seconds, noticed my smile and asked if it was a particularly good book. "It's a wonderful book," I replied. "But honestly, I think I'm smiling because I'm free." She laughed, understanding immediately. "Running away from family for the holidays? Running toward myself?" I corrected gently. "There's a difference." The cottage I'd rented was even more charming than the photos had suggested. It sat just 2 blocks from the beach in a quiet residential area, painted a soft yellow with white shutters and a front porch perfect for morning coffee. Inside, everything was clean and simple, decorated with coastal touches that felt peaceful rather than cluttered. I unpacked slowly, taking my time to hang up clothes, arrange my books on the nightstand, set out my toiletries in the bathroom. These small acts of domesticity felt different here, felt like self-care rather than obligation. No one was going to criticize my choices or demand I do things differently. This space was mine, at least for the week. That afternoon I walked to the beach. The December air was cool but not cold, and the beach was nearly empty except for a few other people who'd chosen solitude over crowded family gatherings. I took off my shoes and walked along the water's edge, feeling the sand between my toes and the spray of ocean mist on my face. I thought about the past 6 years, about how I'd lost myself gradually, so slowly I hadn't noticed until I was completely gone. I thought about the woman I used to be before Marcus got married, before Taylor entered our lives. That woman had been independent, had traveled occasionally, had maintained friendships and hobbies. Where had she gone? But I also thought about the woman I was becoming, the woman who'd stood in her kitchen and said no, who'd hired a private investigator, who'd consulted with attorneys, who'd drawn boundaries and enforced consequences. That woman was stronger than the one who'd existed before, forged in the fire of mistreatment and emerging with clearer vision about what she would and wouldn't accept. That evening, I went to a small restaurant the cottage owner had recommended. I sat at a table by the window, ordered whatever I wanted without considering anyone else's preferences, and ate slowly, savoring every bite. The server, a young woman probably in her 20s, asked if I was waiting for someone. "No," I said with a smile, "just me tonight." "Good for you," she said approvingly. "I wish more women would take themselves out to dinner. My grandmother says she's been married 40 years and has never eaten at a restaurant alone." "Tell your grandmother it's never too late to start," I said. Christmas Eve dawned bright and beautiful. I spent the morning reading on the porch, wrapped in a blanket with hot tea, watching neighbors walk their dogs and families heading to the beach. My phone buzzed occasionally with messages. Marcus sent a photo of him and Taylor at his apartment, both of them wearing casual clothes and attempting to cook what looked like spaghetti. "Our first meal cooked together without your help," his message read. "It's not pretty, but it's ours." I smiled and sent back a heart emoji. Leonard Carter sent a message confirming that Taylor had made her first debt payment on time and in full. "She seems to be taking this seriously," he wrote. "Time will tell." My neighbor from Baltimore sent a picture of my house, all locked up and safe. "Everything is fine here. Enjoy your freedom." Freedom? That word kept appearing, kept resonating. Was this what freedom felt like? The ability to make choices without guilt? The option to spend time however I pleased? The right to exist as a complete person rather than as an extension of someone else's needs? Around noon, something unexpected happened. My phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Is this Rosalind Jenkins?" a male voice asked. "Yes, this is she." "Mrs. Jenkins, my name is Vincent Hayes. I'm Taylor's uncle." My heart sank. Here it comes, I thought. The family member calling to guilt me, to tell me what a terrible person I am for ruining Christmas. "Mr. Hayes," I said carefully, "how did you get this number?" "From Marcus," he said. "I hope you don't mind me calling. I wanted to speak with you directly." "Go ahead," I said, bracing myself for accusations. "I wanted to apologize," Vincent said, and his words surprised me so much I nearly dropped the phone. "Taylor told us what really happened, the full story about the debt and the fraud and how she'd been treating you. My whole family is horrified. We had no idea." "You're apologizing to me?" I asked, genuinely stunned. "Mrs. Jenkins, Taylor painted a very different picture of your relationship. She told us you were overbearing, that you insisted on controlling every family gathering, that you refused to let her host anything without your supervision. We believed her because, well, she's family and we trusted her." "I see," I said quietly, processing this new information. "So all these years, you thought I was the problem." "We did," Vincent admitted, "and we're deeply ashamed." When Taylor finally told us the truth about the debt, about forging Marcus's signatures, about trying to mortgage your house without permission, we were shocked. Then when she explained how she'd been treating you, using your home like a free venue, taking credit for your cooking, we realized we'd been complicit in mistreating you. "You didn't know," I said, because despite everything, I understood how convincing Taylor could be. She's very good at manipulation. She had Marcus fooled for 6 years. She had me doubting my own perceptions. "Of course she fooled you too. That's generous of you to say, but it doesn't excuse our behavior," Vincent replied. "We should have questioned things. We should have wondered why you never sat down to eat with us, why you were always in the kitchen working while Taylor was out front playing hostess. We should have thanked you directly, instead of complimenting Taylor on meals she didn't prepare." "What made her tell you the truth?" I asked, curious about what had finally broken through Taylor's carefully constructed facade. "Marcus did," Vincent said. "He called a family meeting on video chat with all of us, Taylor's parents, her siblings, me and my wife. He presented all the evidence, showed us the financial documents, explained the legal situation. Then he asked Taylor to tell us, in her own words, what she'd done, and she did. She broke down and confessed everything. I felt a surge of pride in my son. He'd found his backbone, had chosen truth over comfort, had supported his wife while still holding her accountable. "That must have been difficult for him," I said. "It was," Vincent agreed. "But he said his mother had taught him that real love sometimes means difficult conversations. He said if he truly loved Taylor, he had to help her face reality, instead of enabling her delusions. He learned that lesson faster than I did," I admitted. "It took me 6 years to apply it. Mrs. Jenkins, I hope you can accept my family's sincere apology. We took advantage of your generosity, and we're sorry. We'd like to make it right somehow, but I'm not sure how." "The fact that you called means something," I told him honestly. "The fact that you believed the truth when you heard it means something. Many families would have circled the wagons around Taylor and attacked Marcus for exposing her." "We considered it," Vincent said candidly, "for about 5 minutes. But then my wife asked a simple question. She said, if our daughter had been treating her mother-in-law this way, would we want someone to tell us, or would we want to stay ignorant? And we realized we'd want to know, so we could correct it before it destroyed relationships permanently." "Your wife sounds wise," I said. "She is," he agreed. "She's also the one who suggested I call you today. She said Christmas Eve is a time for healing, and maybe hearing from one of Taylor's family members might help you heal. Tell her thank you," I said, feeling unexpected emotion rising in my throat. "And tell her that it does help. It helps to know that not everyone was conspiring against me, that some people care about doing the right thing, even when it's uncomfortable." We talked for a few more minutes. Vincent told me about his own family, about his career as a civil engineer, about his hopes that Taylor would use this crisis as an opportunity for genuine change. Before we hung up, he said something that stayed with me. "Mrs. Jenkins, my mother used to say that sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the gift of consequences. You gave Taylor that gift. Most people would have either stayed silent or destroyed her completely. You found a middle path that gives her a chance to change while protecting yourself. That takes wisdom and compassion." After the call ended, I sat on the porch for a long time, watching the late afternoon light paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. I thought about the complexity of families, about how easily misunderstandings compound, about how one person's lies can poison multiple relationships. But I also thought about resilience, about truth, about the possibility of redemption. Christmas Eve dinner was at a different restaurant, this one fancier, with white tablecloths and candles. I dressed up for the occasion, wore the pearl necklace my late husband had given me decades ago, put on lipstick and perfume. When I arrived, the hostess looked at me with that same question in her eyes. "Just one?" "Just one," I confirmed. "And I'd like a table with a view of the water, please." She seated me at a beautiful spot by the window. The harbor was lit up with Christmas lights, and boats decorated with garland floated peacefully in the marina. I ordered champagne, a luxury I never allowed myself at home, and toasted silently to new beginnings. The meal was exquisite. Each course was perfectly prepared, beautifully presented, served with grace and attention. I ate slowly, appreciating the artistry, the flavor, the simple pleasure of food I hadn't had to shop for, or cook, or clean up after. At the next table, a family was celebrating, 3 generations together, laughing and sharing stories. I watched them with something that wasn't quite envy but also wasn't quite contentment. I was happy for them, happy they had what I'd lost. But I was also happy for myself, happy to be choosing peace over performance, authenticity over obligation. As I finished my dessert, a decadent chocolate creation I'd never have ordered at home because someone else would have wanted something different, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Taylor. "Mrs. Jenkins, I don't expect you to respond to this. I just wanted you to know that I told my family everything tonight. All of it. Uncle Vincent probably already called you. Everyone is angry at me, disappointed in me, and they should be. But they also asked me to tell you something. They said that in their family, they have a tradition. On Christmas Eve, they forgive one big mistake, one serious wrong, because that's what the season is supposed to be about. They want to extend that forgiveness to me, but they said it's conditional. I have to earn yours first, so I'm working on that. Day by day, choice by choice, I'm working on becoming someone worthy of forgiveness. Merry Christmas, Rosalind. Thank you for not giving up on us completely." I read Taylor's message 3 times, looking for manipulation, searching for hidden agendas, trying to detect the usual patterns of her behavior. But this time, the words felt different, raw, genuine. Whether that genuineness would last beyond this moment of crisis remained to be seen, but for now, I chose to accept it at face value. I typed back a simple response. "Merry Christmas, Taylor. Keep working. Time will tell." Christmas morning in Charleston was peaceful in a way I hadn't experienced in years. I woke naturally, without an alarm, without the immediate rush of meal preparation and house cleaning. I made coffee in the cottage's small kitchen, carried it out to the porch, and watched the sun rise over the neighborhood. A few families were already up, children excitedly riding new bicycles, parents following behind with cameras and coffee cups. I felt a pang of something, not quite regret, not quite longing, but a gentle acknowledgement of what I'd chosen to leave behind this year. But I also felt profound relief. Relief that I wasn't standing in a kitchen cooking for people who wouldn't thank me. Relief that I wasn't cleaning up after a party I didn't want to host. Relief that I was exactly where I wanted to be, doing exactly what I wanted to do. Around 10, Marcus called, "Merry Christmas, Mom." "Merry Christmas, son," I replied, hearing the warmth in both our voices. "How are you spending the day?" "Taylor and I are volunteering at a soup kitchen downtown," he said, surprising me. It was her idea, actually. She said she needed to remember what it feels like to serve others without expecting credit or compensation. "We'll be here until 3, then going back to the apartment for a simple dinner. Nothing fancy, just us." "That sounds perfect," I said, meaning it. "I'm proud of both of you. What about you? What are your plans?" "I'm going for a long walk on the beach this morning," I told him. "Then I have a reservation at a restaurant for Christmas dinner. After that, I think I'll come back here, read my book, maybe watch a movie. Simple, peaceful." "You deserve that peace, Mom," Marcus said quietly. "You've earned it about 1,000 times over." We talked for a few more minutes, easy conversation, without tension or hidden agendas. Before we hung up, Marcus said, "Mom, I want you to know something. This Christmas, being apart from you, it made me realize how much I took for granted. I always assumed you'd be there, always available, always willing. I never stopped to think about what you might want, what you might need. I'm sorry for that, and I'm going to do better." "I know you will," I said. "You already are." The beach was more crowded on Christmas Day, filled with tourists and locals alike who'd chosen ocean air over traditional celebrations. I walked for miles, letting the rhythm of the waves clear my mind, feeling the wind tangle my hair, not caring that I probably looked windblown and wild. An older couple, probably in their 72nd, walked past holding hands. The woman smiled at me. "Merry Christmas, dear. Beautiful day for a walk, isn't it?" "It's perfect," I agreed. "Absolutely perfect." Christmas dinner at the restaurant was a revelation. The chef had prepared a special holiday menu, and every dish was spectacular. I sat at my table, looking out at the Charleston Harbor, and thought about all the Christmas dinners I'd prepared over the years. The hours of planning, shopping, cooking, serving. The stress of making everything perfect. The exhaustion that followed. And I realized something important. I'd been giving those dinners from a place of obligation and fear rather than genuine generosity. I'd been cooking to avoid conflict, to maintain relationships, to prove my worth. But real generosity comes from overflow, not from depletion. It comes from choosing to give, not from being forced to provide. Maybe someday I'd cook Christmas dinner again. Maybe when boundaries were established and respect was genuine. Maybe when I could do it because I wanted to, not because I was expected to. But that day was not today, and I was okay with that. As I finished my meal, I pulled out my phone and composed a message, not to Marcus or Taylor, but to myself. A note I saved in my phone to read whenever I felt myself slipping back into old patterns. "Rosalind Jenkins, you are 64 years old. You have spent decades serving others, teaching students, raising a son, being useful and necessary. Now you get to be more than useful. You get to be valued. You get to be respected. You get to choose. Never forget what it cost you to learn this lesson. Never forget that boundaries aren't mean. They're healthy. Never forget that you deserve to be treated with dignity. And never, ever forget that your worth isn't measured by what you can do for others, but by who you are." I paid my bill, left a generous tip for the server who'd made my solo Christmas dinner feel special rather than lonely, and walked back to the cottage through streets decorated with lights and garland. When I arrived, I found a package on the porch. Inside was a beautiful cashmere scarf in deep blue, my favorite color, and a card. "Mrs. Jenkins, this is from all of us in the Hayes family. We wanted you to have something beautiful this Christmas, something chosen specifically for you. We hope it keeps you warm and reminds you that some families do appreciate kindness, even when they're slow to recognize it. With sincere apologies and warm wishes, Vincent, Simone, Gabrielle, Brandon, and everyone else who benefited from your generosity without properly acknowledging it. I wrapped the scarf around my shoulders and felt the softness of it, the quality, the thoughtfulness. It was beautiful, yes, but more than that, it was a symbol. A symbol that truth had consequences, but also that truth could heal. A symbol that some people, when confronted with their own failures, chose to do better rather than get defensive. A symbol that families could change, could grow, could learn. That evening, as I settled into the cottage's comfortable couch with my book, I realized something profound. For 6 years, I'd been trying to hold my family together by making myself smaller, by accommodating every demand, by swallowing every hurt. But families held together by one person's suffering aren't really together at all. They're just elaborate performances of togetherness, built on a foundation that will eventually crumble. Real family, healthy family, requires mutual respect, clear boundaries, and genuine appreciation. It requires everyone to show up, everyone to contribute, everyone to value each other. And if those elements aren't present, then sometimes the most loving thing you can do is step back and let people face the reality of what they've built. My name is Rosalind Jenkins. I'm 64 years old, and this Christmas, I gave myself the greatest gift I've ever received. The gift of self-respect, the gift of boundaries, the gift of freedom. It wasn't easy. It wasn't comfortable. It required courage I didn't know I had, and consequences I wasn't sure I could enforce. But it was necessary. And it was worth it. Because for the first time in 6 years, I'm not someone's maid, someone's caterer, someone's unpaid labor. I'm just Rosalind, and Rosalind is enough. That is Rosalind Jenkins' story. Now I want to hear from you. Where are you watching this from? What city? What country? Drop it in the comments below. I love seeing our global community come together over these stories about family boundaries, financial fraud, and the moment when you have to choose between being useful and being valued. Real question: if you were Rosalind, what would you have done? Would you have cooked Christmas dinner for 22 people after 6 years of being treated like a maid? Would you have stayed silent about the credit card fraud and forged signatures? Or would you have stood up the way Rosalind did and demanded respect? Tell me in the comments. Hit that like button if this story made you feel something. Share it if you know someone dealing with entitled family members who only show up when they need something. Someone whose daughter-in-law treats them like unpaid staff instead of family. Someone struggling with the choice between keeping peace and demanding dignity. And subscribe for more raw, real stories about toxic family dynamics, adult children who exploit their parents, daughters-in-law who manipulate and deceive, financial abuse within families, and what happens when you finally say enough is enough. Thanks for watching. Sometimes the people who benefit most from your generosity are the ones who appreciate it least. Sometimes being a good parent means letting your child face consequences instead of rescuing them. Sometimes love means setting boundaries that feel uncomfortable. And sometimes the only way to save yourself is to walk away from people who only value what you can provide. See you in the next video.